This video is brought to you by Nebula. Today, Zelenskyy is almost killed in a missile strike in Odessa. China has accused the US of being obsessed with suppressing Beijing, and Michelle Donelan is under fire for costing the taxpayer £15,000 in a libel case. From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Thursday the 7th of March 2024. A Russian ballistic missile struck the port of Odessa in Ukraine, very close to where Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis were yesterday, according to Mitsotakis. The pair were at the Odessa harbour, where Zelenskyy was explaining the importance of the Black Sea port to Ukrainian exports, before sirens went off nearby and an explosion happened about 300 metres away. While Zelenskyy and Mitsotakis were unharmed, 5 people were killed and several others injured by the strike, which Russia said hit a hangar containing sea drones used to attack Russian ships in the Black Sea. Mitsotakis used the experience, which he described as very intense, to call on EU leaders to visit Ukraine, saying, "It's one thing to see or hear the description from the media or from President Zelenskyy, with whom we communicate regularly, and it's completely different to experience the war firsthand." The strike came days after 12 people, including 5 children, were killed in Odessa when a Russian drone hit a residential block. A spokesperson for US President Joe Biden said the attack showed the urgent need for weapons, as the White House struggles to end Republican opposition to new US aid packages for Ukraine. EU leaders also condemned the attack, with the European Council President Charles Michel calling it another sign of Russia's cowardly tactics in its war of aggression against Ukraine, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen saying it was a new attempt at terror. It took place during what was Mitsotakis' first visit to Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion, with Mitsotakis choosing to visit Odessa instead of Kyiv, as the city played an important role in Greece's struggle for independence against the Ottomans in the early 19th century. There's more on the way, but be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to make the daily briefing part of your daily routine, or just search for us on your podcast app to listen along. In Parliament today, China has accused the US of being obsessed with suppressing Beijing, and has promised to deepen relations with Russia as a result of asserting what Beijing calls a multipolar world order. Speaking at China's 2 sessions, China's annual parliamentary and political advisory meetings, Foreign Minister Wang Yi accused the US of imposing sanctions on Chinese companies to a bewildering and unfathomable level. Yi further expressed Beijing's opposition to unilateralism and protectionism, and stressed the importance of mutual respect, saying it's unacceptable that certain countries are at the table while others are on the menu. The US has a long history of sanctioning Chinese companies and officials, but the US really began to crack down on China during the Trump administration. Trump prohibited investment in companies linked to China's military, put sanctions on Huawei, and sanctioned Chinese officials over violations of Uyghur human rights in Xinjiang, and Hong Kong officials for undermining Hong Kong's autonomy. Relations haven't gotten any better since President Joe Biden took the reins, and especially after Russia began its war in Ukraine. The Biden administration imposed sanctions on Chinese firms for exporting missile microelectronics, supplying satellite images to the Wagner Group, and providing drone equipment to an Iranian company for Russia. China's relationship with Russia has been described as a no-limits friendship, and China has supported Russia diplomatically and economically since the start of the war. Yi said China will continue to seek deeper ties with Russia, and described their relationship as a key driver of creating a multipolar world. In other news today, it's been reported that 3 crew members on board a merchant ship have been killed in a Houthi missile strike in the Gulf of Aden. This makes it, at least according to the US military, the first fatalities reported since the Yemen-based group began attacks on shipping. Upon the ship being hit with a missile, the crew abandoned ship and deployed lifeboats. The vessel was a Barbados-flagged ship and was hit about 50 nautical miles southwest of the port. A Houthi spokesperson took responsibility for the attack, saying that the attacks would only stop when the siege on the Palestinian people in Gaza is lifted. The UN has called on the Houthis to cease all attacks against international shipping in the Red Sea. It's been reported this week that taxpayers have financed a £15,000 payout to academics that Science Minister Michelle Donelan criticised in a letter last year. In the letter, written to the UK Research and Innovation public body, Michelle Donelan urged them to cut ties with Dr. Kemna Patel and Professor Kate Sang, as they had shared extremist views and they had expressed support for Hamas. On the part of Professor Sang, the only indication of this so-called support was when they quote-tweeted a Guardian article explaining the Hamas attack, with her saying, "This is disturbing." On the part of Dr. Patel, she retweeted a post describing Israel's actions as genocide and apartheid. On Tuesday, Donelan issued a statement withdrawing her claims that Professor Sang supported Hamas and that Patel had disseminated extremist views, following a libel case brought by the academics. UK taxpayers subsequently had to cover the £15,000 settlement. As a result, Peter Kyle, Labour's Shadow Science Secretary, said that it was outrageous that £15,000 of taxpayers' money had been spent on the Science Secretary calling a scientist a terrorist sympathiser on social media, without any evidence at all. He added, Michelle Donelan should be embarrassed, she should apologise, and she should repay the full amount back to the taxpayer. The EU is expected to sign a €210 million agreement with Mauritania in a deal to reduce irregular migration into Europe, despite human rights concerns. It's modelled on a controversial agreement struck between Brussels and Tunisia last year, and will dedicate some €60 million to migration management, including supporting the Mauritanian authorities to better patrol their waters and stop migrant boats from setting off for the Canary Islands, which are Spanish territory. The rest of the funding will go to other areas like security, economic development, or humanitarian aid. And finally, in some uplifting news, the EU has reached a provisional deal to cut package waste and ban single-use plastics, such as supermarket bags. This is quite a significant move by the EU, considering that packaging waste in the EU has jumped by more than 20% in the last decade, driven mostly by online shopping and wasteful consumer habits. So the EU agreed this week to reduce packaging targets by 5% by 2030 and 15% by 2040, and that all packaging should be recyclable by 2030. By then, there will also be a ban applied to single-use plastic items. If you want to keep learning and expanding your knowledge, then I'd recommend you check out Wendover Productions' brilliant series, The Logistics of X. You likely know Wendover already, but in this series they dive deeper into the logistics and operations behind everything from search and rescue operations to ski resorts and coal mining. One episode I think you'd particularly enjoy is their latest, which gets into the logistics of weapons manufacturing, something that's key to a number of topics we discuss regularly in TLDR videos, and something that directly impacts wars and conflicts all around the world. It's a brilliantly researched and thorough series, and it's exclusively available on our streaming service Nebula. As you likely know, Nebula is the service we built with a bunch of our creator friends, and is the home to tons of smart educational content from all of your favourite creators. The best part is that by signing up, you not only get access to exclusive series like The Logistics of X, Modern Conflicts from Real Life Law, or China Actually from Polymatter, it also directly supports TLDR. That's because when you sign up, you contribute to the budgets of these big budget documentaries and help us grow and expand our ambitions. If you want to get more superb context and support TLDR, then if you sign up using the link below, you can support us directly and get Nebula for 40% off their annual plan. That's less than £2 a month. Thanks for your support and for backing Nebula.